So I did a podcast recently. You might remember that I did one a few months ago about acne, and this time I did one about eczema. And unfortunately, that podcast isn't going to be released for several months because, FX Medicine records people all over the place and they're constantly editing and mastering recordings. But I thought, I could give you the headlines of the podcast. So I thought today what I'd talk about mostly is food and how it's related to eczema. Now, from my experience in clinical practice, there are three main reasons why people get eczema related to food. So three main types of reactions. And the most important one is food allergy. A lot of people do have frank food allergy. And this needs to be detected by blood test or by scratch test. And it usually happens in children when they're referred to a paediatrician or to the children's hospital. The other types of food reactions are intolerances, and there are two types of intolerances. There's an acronym for the first one. It's not a very nice acronym. It's called SAGS. What it is short for is salicylates, amines, and glutamates. And it's a very complicated group of foods and a very large group of foods. And nobody can really understand why people have reactions to them. As far as they can tell, there's no sort of immune reaction that's measured. But we do know that there is a reaction to them. And, the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney certainly researches this to a great degree, and the effect that those types of foods have on people who experience asthma, eczema, and hay fever. And unfortunately, there isn't a fancy test to detect whether you have an intolerance to those. You simply have to do it as a process of elimination. So looking at, do you react strongly to foods in those groups that have strong amounts of salicylates, amines, or glutamates? And the treatment is then avoidance and elimination of foods that have concentrated versions of those food chemicals, and then gradual reintroduction. And just as a side note, I want to say that there's nothing actually wrong with those foods. The food chemicals that are in them are naturally occurring food chemicals. And in fact, they're often very, very healthy foods. It's just that sometimes particular individuals have reactions to them. And the third type of food intolerance that I see in clinic is immune mediated. It's very different to allergy though. Allergy is an immune reaction that's quite immediate, and it can also be life-threatening, which is why if anyone has an allergy and they ever want to re-challenge a food and find out if they're still allergic to it, that should only ever be done under medical supervision and the appropriate conditions where things like EpiPens and adrenaline are available in case there is a reaction. But the third type of reaction that it's immune mediated that I'm referring to is an intolerance. And this can be measured, by using the blood and working out whether someone has an intolerance, if their immune system has an intolerance to particular types of foods. And again, the treatment is very similar. It's determining what are the foods that you have a reaction to, avoiding them for a set amount of time, and I usually set that period based on how extreme the reaction is. I do some restorative work in that time, and then we look at a gradual and staged reintroduction. So at the foundation of all my treatments related to food and eczema is always in the future the potential for reintroducing foods where that's safe, as I said before, because I don't think it's necessarily realistic or a great quality of life for people to have to avoid foods forever. Nobody wants to do that. So the mainstay of my treatment is looking at how we can reintroduce those foods over time. So that's all for today. And in further videos, I will talk about different kinds of treatments related to the outside and the inside for eczema. Thank you.